Rajani LaRocca. And yeah, before I was an author, I was a doctor. So I'm an internal medicine doctor. I'm still practicing. And I loved reading like from when I was really little, and I used to write a lot when I was younger, even through college. But I also knew from a pretty young age that I wanted to go into medicine. And so uh, I thought that I had to choose. And I remember being in a high school creative writing class and telling my teacher, I really love writing, but I know this isn't going to be my career because I really hope I get to go into medicine. And he said something to me that changed my life. He said, "Who says you have to choose?" And he brought in all these books the next day that were written by by authors who happened to be doctors. And I was like, oh, so that totally made me think like maybe this is a possibility. But I put writing on the back burner for a very long time. And so I went to medical school and residency, and then kind of after a decade or so of practicing medicine and then having kids and having them in school and stuff like that, I finally got back to writing. I started off as doing it just for something that, like, to do something that I loved just for myself. And then after a couple of years of kind of taking classes and meeting other writers and becoming kind of, sucked into the whole writing world and forming friendships, I decided maybe I would try to get published. And so that was about 9 years ago. And in 2019 was my first book, Midsummer's Mayhem. That was a novel. And then 2020 came my first picture book, Seven Golden Rings. And then last year I had 6 books come out, including Red, White, and Whole. And then this year, my next picture book, I'll Go and Come Back, came out. And then I have another 6-book year next year, which is crazy. Yay, I'll Go and Come Back.
Yes, and I have to say your books are a big hit at our house. But just go back to one. So you said you had always wanted to write, but it had been on the back burner. Was there something that sparked you deciding like, okay, now I'm going to focus my attention back on writing?
I don't think there was any particular thing. I think it was something that had kind of been in the back of my mind. And I finally got to the place where I was like, my children are old enough, they're in school. And I've been practicing medicine for long enough, and I feel like I kind of maybe know what I'm doing there. So I thought maybe it's time to just do something for me that's creative.
And how do you find the time? I mean, how are you so prolific and you're still practicing medicine?
Well, I think the short answer is that when you love something, you always find time for it. So, and I don't know how to explain it. I think basically I understood that there's going to be a learning curve for writing, just like there was for medicine. No one expects you to start studying medicine and then like the next day or the next month or the next year even like start practicing medicine. Like no one expects that. So why would we assume that we could do that as writers too? So I figured it was going to take some time. And so those early years when I was thinking about getting published, or maybe not, I was just doing the best I could to improve my craft and make my writing as good as possible. And kind of generating lots of ideas and then working on lots of different things. And I guess maybe my background in medicine means that I understand deadlines. I meet them. There's no way around it kind of in that world. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to treat this any differently. And I would, as a working mom, I would just find time whenever I could. I would do it. I would write when my kids were in piano lessons, when I was parked in the lot waiting to pick them up from school. I would, late at night after everyone else was, doing homework or asleep or whatever, I would write, or sometimes I would wake up early in the morning. So I would just kind of find the time that I could. And now my kids are grown-ups. I mean, they're in college and one's out of college. So I have a lot more time.
Right.
And and I've cut back a little bit on my medical practice too, to do more writing.
Well, and I read a really fascinating interview that you did where you talked about how medicine, your background in medicine has helped you as a writer, and kind of what you mentioned about how it gave you a lot of discipline about practicing the repetition of a skill, I think you said, and like you said, the deadlines. But another thing that really struck me about your books is that they're all so different. I mean, a lot of times you have someone who just writes picture books or just middle grade, or it's just fiction, and yet you have picture books and novels, nonfiction and fiction. You've written, of course, Red, White, and Whole is a novel in verse. And you have all these different influences. I mentioned the nonfiction. You have a book that just came out about DNA. Do you think that being a third culture kid kind of let you, I don't know, opened up a little more to be comfortable with having multiple identities, multiple influences, and all of that? Or where do you think that comes from?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it. I think that I was always somebody, and this is true to this day, I was always somebody who was doing, who had to be in kind of more than one world at a time and be comfortable with it. I mean, I think a lot of us writers feel this way, that we're always slightly the weird one in the room. So I think that's good.
Right.
I mean, I was a child and an adult who is interested in all kinds of things. So I didn't really see the reason to limit myself. When I went to college, I knew I was going to go to medical school, so I took all the pre-med requirements, but I was a government major because I was interested in that. And I was like, when else am I going to study this? I was always a weirdo. So I figure writing is a great place to explore all those things that you're interested in. And that's the truth. I love fiction and nonfiction. I love poetry. I love prose. And I love novels and picture books. When I started writing, when I first started writing and I was taking classes, I thought I was going to be a novelist. Like that's what I wanted to do. But then I took this class on kind of like a survey of children's literature. And then I remembered how magical picture books could be. And I was like, of course I want to write these too, right? If I can. And so, yeah, I think that actually doing a variety of different things is helpful, because I think that novel writers could learn from the economy of words in picture books and the need to really, really understand your story. And I think that picture book writers can experience a whole new level of freedom when it comes to like a novel length work, and really being able to delve into characters and have all kinds of side stories and other things going on. So yeah, and I like it. And the other thing is that when you get tired of one project, if you have more than one project going on, you can always go to the other project and still feel like you're making headway somewhere, but also taking a break from that project that's making you tired.
Is there a genre that you'd like to try that you haven't done yet?
Oh, yes, yes. So I'm writing a YA novel. That's supposed to come out in 2025, I think. So that's something that I'm working on. And then I'm also interested in writing chapter books and graphic novels. I'm studying graphic novels right now. I'm just trying to read a bunch and kind of understand kind of the stories that are suited for that format.
Well, it's interesting to go back to what we were talking about earlier about having these different interests. That I know you said that you make sure to mention this when you talk to kids, that they kind of like the teacher had told you, you don't have to choose. You can be this person who has all these interests. And I think that really comes through in the individual books, like the characters. A lot of times they are dealing with multiple identities, whether it's different cultures in your family, or that the characters are not very easy to pigeonhole, and that even the subject of the book is not very easy to strictly define, like Shakespeare and baseball, or Hindu mythology and 80s pop music, just to give a few examples. So why are you drawn, do you think, to making these unexpected connections? And kind of like you had mentioned before, is this what as the world is like today, and what kind of the world that your current readers are inhabiting, where you're not one thing or another, you have these different influences?
I think the truth is we've always been this way, that none of us is just one thing, that we're all made up of multiple different identities, and that's something to be celebrated. rather than something to be ashamed of. I think that during adolescence, we all kind of go through this period where we don't know what we want to do. Do we want to be like everyone else? Because we kind of do, but also we have to be ourselves because we have to. So I think that that's kind of a universal theme in humanity and, especially adolescence. I also think that, I mean, personally, I write stories that are interesting to me. So I'm interested in all those things. I am a Shakespeare nerd who likes baking and baseball and math. And, and I was a child of the 80s who grew up as an immigrant in this country, who read the stories from my home country, but also was very much immersed in the pop culture of where I was growing up in the US. So, they tell you when you start to write the story that only you can tell. And so I think that by using things that we are interested in ourselves as people, we end up writing the stories that only we can tell. Because I'm not sure that anybody else would have come up with those combination of things.
Right.
And that's good. So I think that means that basically everybody out there who is writing, they just need to write about the stuff that they're interested in, and they're going to end up with a story that only they can tell. And, the other thing is just kind of like from a business standpoint, right? When agents and editors are looking for books and they say they want something fresh, I think this is what they're talking about. They're talking about unusual combinations of things, or just unique characters that they haven't seen before. And it's hard to believe after this many years of human beings writing and telling stories that there would be things that are new, but of course there are things that are new, right?
Right. And one common theme that comes up, which along the lines of what you talked about, is this struggle over identity, which especially for kids with mixed heritage or kids who are in immigrant families, what do you hope that the readers take away from your books? Either those that have had kind of a similar experience, or maybe those who haven't had that experience. What do you hope that they kind of get after reading your books?
Yeah, I think a lot of the characters in my books wonder about where they belong. And I hope that readers understand that the notion of belonging is something that we create, right? So we ultimately, we find the places where we belong. We create the communities where we belong. But and I think that almost everybody has felt this way. It doesn't actually matter whether you grow up in one culture or not. I'm pretty sure everyone has had that thought. Oh my goodness, do I belong here? Like, am I part of this group? I don't know. So the flip side of that, like that we create the places where we belong, is that it's our duty to kind of our fellow human beings and to ourselves to create spaces where everyone can belong, right? No matter where they come from or what they look like, and who they love, what religion they practice, all of that stuff. We can create communities in which everyone feels like they have a part. And so that's the other thing, is that, and I think that this is universal in literature, but especially in children's literature. The reason why we do this is because by reading other people's stories, we learn more about ourselves and we understand each other and what it is to be a person.
I just want to mention, because I know you're probably not reading the comments as you're talking, but you've gotten several nice comments about people saying how much they love your book. Somebody just picked up a book from the library, not even knowing about today's session, and read it last night with their daughter. So getting a lot of really great comments there. And to go back to what you were saying, I think it's so important when you're talking about creating communities and space where everybody can feel like they belong, and how you are doing that with your books, like how books can help create community and help make those connections. And we're coming up on time, so I want to switch gears and talk about something completely different. Well, kind of different, because it is talking about having different influence, and that is about math and science and how you incorporate those in your books. Now, obviously, you have your nonfiction book about DNA, which is obviously about science, but also I read where you try to incorporate it into your other books, just in the form of things like you have a puzzle that they're trying to solve, kind of like I think you said that you loved the Weston game growing up, like things like that. Can you talk more about that, and just in general about how books can help kids get interested in math and science and in STEM?
Yeah, so I write things that include math and science because I love math and science. They're among my first loves in my life. And I was a kid who always loved puzzles and riddles, and I think actually most children do. I remember car rides with my kids and how we would tell each other riddles or puzzles, or we would get those little puzzle books or logic puzzles or something. We would always be working on something. And I think kids in particular love those kinds of things and love mysteries. And my son was actually on a math team, and they had basically they just like did a bunch of interesting math problems that were always kind of like a riddle-like or puzzle-like presentation. And one of the things was just to like learn how to solve a particular type of problem. And once you knew like the trick, it wouldn't take you half an hour. You could do it in 5 minutes, And so it was really fun, but it was also like, it was obviously problem solving and skill building, but it was just fun. And so in Much Ado About Baseball, there are two kids who are math puzzler competition rivals who are also on the same baseball team. And there's a whole link between baseball and math, of course. But I just love the idea of making these things fun, because most of the time, unless we are in a mathematical or scientific field, the ways we use math and science are just kind of the everyday ways that we live, right? So of course they're important, but they're also fun. So if you can, if you have a question that just comes up in your real life, right? Even if it's as simple as like, there's 7 people here and we have a pizza that's separated into, cut into 8 pieces. How do we make sure everybody gets an equal share of pizza? That's fun. If you can figure that out in a non-stressful way, that's fun. So so that's why I think that basically joy informs a lot of what I write. And so especially the math and science stuff, it means joy to me. So that's what I try and put on the page.
I love it. I love it. And so I'm going to ask you a question that might be impossible to answer. And I didn't preview this with you before, but it just occurred to me as we're talking. So you have so many books that are out. If let's say somebody's watching and they've never read any of your books before, do you have one that you would say, okay, start with this one? Or is that impossible to answer?
It's hard. Kids always ask me this. It's like the "What's your favorite book?" question, right? That's a tricky question because it's like asking you for about your favorite child, and you can't do that either. But I will say I'm very fortunate to have a lot of books in the world, and depending on what mood you're in or how old you are, you might want to choose one or the other. Like, for example, if you want something that is kind of deeply emotional, might make you cry, but also has like a lot of fun 80s stuff in it, Red, White, and Whole would be the one for you. If you're interested in the intersection between Shakespeare and baking, that would be Midsummer's Mayhem. Yeah. If you're into math and baseball, that's Much Ado About Baseball. And in terms of picture books, I mean, 7 Golden Rings has a math puzzle and an introduction to binary numbers. Bracelets for Bina's Brothers has math kind of pattern making and pattern recognition that's for early math. And it's like a family story as well. Where 3 Oceans Meet is about immigration, but it's also about like the link between mothers and daughters. And I'll Go and Come Back is about a wonderful grandmother and her granddaughter. And of course, The Secret Code Inside You is nonfiction, and it is in rhyme. So if you want rhyming nonfiction, that would be the book to get.
I just want to put in a plug for, like I said, I've mostly read your picture books. I haven't had a chance to read your novels yet. But I'm just going to put a plug for this one, because this is the one that I'll Go and Come Back. We just went and visited my husband's side of the family this summer in Costa Rica, and just so many of the issues are the same about kids wanting to communicate with grandparents, and there's a language difference or cultural barrier, but still how strong the love is there. I just think that's such a beautiful story. So I'll just throw that in there. But
thank you. Grandmothers are amazing. It doesn't matter what language you speak. Grandmothers are amazing. They will find a way to communicate with you.
Yes, they will find a way. That's very true. And just to wrap up, can you give us maybe a sneak preview of some of the books that you have coming out in the next, later next year? Mm-hmm.
It's next year. So my first book coming out next year is another novel in verse called Mirror to Mirror, about twin sisters. Really fun, musical twin sisters. And then I have 4 picture books. 2 are nonfiction. One is A Vaccine is Like a Memory, so a medical picture book about the history of vaccines and how they work. And the other one is called Your One and Only Heart, which is about the human heart and all its contrasting characteristics, and it's written in poetry. And then I have Summer is for Cousins, which is all about a big family getting together over the summer and a little cousin, I don't know, his older cousin. And Masala Chai, Fast and Slow, about a grandson and a grandfather, and tea, of course. And then my other novel is a novel I co-wrote with my friend Chris Barron, The Secret of the Dragon Gems, and it's an epistolary novel. So two kids writing back and forth in letters and emails and chats. It is tons of fun too.
Another new genre for you to conquer.
Yes.
I love it. And I just wanted to mention, you did have another great comment saying, thank you for sharing your passion and energy. You are an inspiration for me and my kids. So, yes, thank you so much for joining us and for being here. It was so great. I feel like we could have talked for a really long time, but I'm be respectful of your time. So thank you so much for being here. And thanks to everybody watching.
Thank you. This was so much fun.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.